Hola! Hey! Hey!
What's up, Muna? How about the compromise? What about we finally start to do some Splatoon 3 projects? Then I can keep watching the trailer for research and we get to do some new projects. How about we start with a good old trusty Custom Amiibo?
Sure!
Yes! How about we include some elements like the little buddy and the new spawners?
Bingo!
Better get started then! For this custom we started with the Splatoon 1 Inkling girl as a base. For her we had to remove her ink tank, separate it from her base, and remove the shoes and her arms. But we will only need to keep the base and the body for this custom. Next we can remove the right tentacle to make the new braid hairstyle. We also carefully remove the arms since we're going to put her in a new pose. After this we've covered the base with painter's tape to start to make the new ink splatter. We want to give the base more of a 3D splatter like the amiibos from Splatoon 2 have. And we have to make a bigger mask to attach the support later on. Although we did come to the realization just how much softer epoxy sculpt is compared to the polymer clay we would previously use. With this, the top splatters would sag while we worked on the ripples in the middle. Then we can start on the figure by first drilling some holes where her arms used to be to put some armature wire there to make a sturdy base for the arms. These are attached with super glue and cut to size using the original arm as a reference. And finally moved into the position we want to use for the figure. We also separated the head from the figure to make her face more to the right. Next we can start to apply the clay to the figure. First we make the braid. For these we made 3 balls and rolled these out with one end to a point. Then we attach these to each other at the rounded end. Then attaching these to the tentacles and smoothing them out before they were styled into the braid. Continuing, we move to the back to make the 2 tentacle ends that replace the 4 that we removed. Then we smoothed out the transitions and added some clay to the neck to make that part smoother. After that had a chance to dry, we can work on the arms. For these we started with a snake of clay that we wrapped around the aluminium armature. After we'd smoothed out the seam, we started to move some clay to the end of the snake to make a flat area which we made into the hands. First cutting into the top to make the thumb, then cutting 3 more times into the rest to make the fingers. Then we move the thumb to the inside and cover this with the other fingers to make a clenched fist. Next we do the same for the other hand. But instead of a closed fist, we used a popsicle stick to mold the fingers around, since the handle will be made from the same kind of sticks. Finally, we start on the sneakers. These are relatively normal sneakers for the Splatoon series, but they do have these 3 stripes on top. After we've made the base for the shoe, we started to form the tongue of the shoe and the curved edges around it. Then we add the separate crease between the top of the shoe and the tongue, which we cover with the 3 strips. Then we add a line for the sole and test the pose again against the spawner, which she will be placed upon. Then we can repeat the same steps for the right shoe. But unlike the other one, we want this one to be curved, so we push the clay into its desired shape and we again check the fit against the spawner. It did need some redefining for the sole and its texture. For the final thing to clay, it's a turn for the little buddy. But with the process of sculpting him after the small fry from our Salmon Run series, we do really realize that if we need some extra props for the amiibo, if they need to be sculpted, then we're better off making them with the sturdier polymer clay. But for the figure's details, then epoxy is still the best. At last we can add the details to the spawner. Until now it's just been a piece of 25mm MDF with a 4mm plywood bottom. Now we can carve in the separation line and drill the holes for the supports. These are made from the same armature wire as before, and these are pulled into position with some tweezers. 2 for the back and 2 coming from the inside of the overhang. These are placed in the middle, then curved to the outside to line up with the back ones. At the ends we curve them to the outside and add these teardrop shaped pieces of clay. We made these with some leftover epoxy clay from the arms. The pointy ends of the drops are sanded down to a flat surface and drilled into so they can be glued upon the armature wire. For the front of the spawner we cut a 16mm diameter circle from the end of a wooden spoon and cut a fitting 60mm dowel 5mm high into half. These are then glued together and after which glued to the front of the spawner. Another 10mm circle and a bigger teardrop are also glued onto these. Finally we bent some wire to make the legs of the spawner. And we cut the top from some craft paper and the pressure gauge from 2mm EVA foam. As the final thing before painting, we use a Dremel to add the tears to the shirt of the girl. Then we can finally start on the long painting process. With black for the spawner and the ink tank, which we made off camera from some popsicle sticks. Then a white base coat for the base, body and the girl. But before we continue with the colors, we need to add some hot glue to make the organic shape of the ink tank. It's best to let this drip, but if it gets really out of shape, you can add some cold water to your fingers and drag them along the edges and the top to shape it. Do keep your fingers moving and especially wet, otherwise you will get fingerprints on your ink tank, or you can even get some hot glue stuck on your fingers. Then we finish the base coats with the last white over the front of the ink tank. Next we can add some details, with the first belonging to the top of the spawner with its spawner graphic. After the black version was applied and a quick white top is made for the handle, then a white version is painted on the bottom. Then a white background with a green to red meter is applied to the pressure gauge with a needle. After all of it has dried, we can go over the white with the yellow, both the handle and the spawner graphic. The same yellow is then applied to the front of the ink tank and to the base. But instead of immediately doing the yellow over the tentacles, we first did the clothes, starting with a very light grey of the shirt. Then we add black to the tears in the shirt and the ink tank straps. We also use black for the shorts she wears. After this black is dried, we do use the yellow, but only on the stripes on the shorts for now. Then we can add the skin tone, which is a skin color mixed with a little bit of brown, since she has been wandering around for a very long time in the scorching sun of the Splatlands. This is then applied to the arms, the legs, and the face and the neck. We also added it in some tears, because in the trailers you can see some skin showing through there. While that dries, we add the white and black indication marks to the ink tank with its red substripe over the whole front, and a red LED on top with a blue bottom edge. You really like him, don't you? Well, as with all the salmonids, he gets a coat of salmonid grey over his body, fins and tail, trying to avoid the mouth, the front of the eyes, the hair and the pants. Given that these get a red-pink for the mouth, a black-green for the pants, and a white mix with a little bit of skin color for the eyes. Then some orange for the hair and the eyes, with a thin black stripe in the middle. Because he's now done, we can return to the girl to paint her shoes. First we need to make a red strip along the back. Then we use a light grey to color the top and the front part of the shoe and the first two stripes. Next, a darker grey is applied to the lower back of the shoe, the tongue and the last front stripe. Finally, a black grey is used for the soles. And a very light grey is used on the nose. Because the rest of the body is now done, we can finally use that yellow for the tops of the tentacles. A little bit of brown is used for the mouth. And a white with a bit of skin color is used for the undersides of the tentacles. Then we paint the mask back over the eyes. And apply the whites back. Then we mix a yellow with some orange and brown to make the color of the gradient on the tentacles and the tips. For ours we use thinner coats, and after the first coat we clean the brush almost completely and go over the ends of the gradient with a wet brush to spread it out even further with a lighter tone. And finally we always start a nude layer of paint from the tip to make sure the most paint or the deepest gradient collects there. After that is dried, we can paint on the eyes with a yellow. And black pupils when those are also dry. And we use the yellow again for the spots on the gradient. At long last, it's finally time to work on the Splat-bow. First to make is the fishing reel. For the base we glued a piece of chopstick between two halves of a spool-like bead with a hobby gem on top. Then we cut some coffee stirring sticks to make the arms, which will get some more pieces of chopstick to make the round ends. Then these are all painted silver. Next we make the side jets, using a long bead which has one end ground flat. Then the tip of a pen is superglued to this flat side and the seam is covered with an angled ring of 2mm EVA foam. For the main jet we used a 10mm dowel and we actually put one end through a big pencil sharpener. Then we sanded the pointy end and a few millimeters from the end we cut it down, so the diameter is a bit smaller than the original dowel. Next this is glued back to the flattened dowel, which will receive some 2mm wide strips of EVA foam next. I don't know. Finally we add the popsicle handle with some 5mm foam ends to the hand, with a reel full of yellow thread added to the front. Then we can paint the rest of the bow with black for the tips of the jets and the handle. And the raised edges of the main jet. Next, after a base of white, we add the yellow to the rest of the bodies and silver to the handle. After the painting, we hot glue these pieces of plastic ring to the main jet, to which the side jets will be installed after a coat of black. Then these pieces are superglued to the handle. And we can continue with the puller. This will be made from some bamboo skewer, cut to size, and with a small piece of 2mm EVA foam. These will then get their black color before we can finish the bow with the limbs. For these we've curved the stirring stick in hot water before cutting it to size, and supergluing these into some small slits in the foam parts of the handle. For decorations, some end caps are glued to the limbs and brushed black, then silver.
Hooray! Yay! Give me high five! Adira!
You're so lucky you're in charge of editing. To finish the amiibo, we can start on the assembly. First, we cut off the yellow paint from the painter's tape before taking it off. Then we cut and sand the acrylic rod, which will be the invisible support for the spawner.
Sure!
So we used some epoxy glue to attach the rod between the hole we drilled in the ink and the spawner. And attach some corrugated paper as rusted metal around the base for that Splatcalypse look. Finally, we glue the ink tank to her back.
Whee!
And with some armature reinforcements, we superglue her to the spawner to finish this Splatoon to finish this Splatoon 3 Inkling Girl Custom Amiibo.
I mean, you know me.
Hey Career Gears, Robert here again, and we hope you enjoyed our take on the Splatoon 3 Custom Amiibo. With the upcoming projects, we will try to do some more Splatoon 3 projects, like a diorama to store this Custom Amiibo, or we can even do a replica prop of some of the new forms of the weapons. But those will all come in the coming months, so we would subscribe so you will not miss them. Well, that's going to be all from us now. Keep those Career Gears turning, and we will see you in the next video.